Hello, horse friends. This is session 6 with Silvio the Mustang. And I'm starting out this session the same way I did the last couple of sessions. I'm just laying out some things for him to explore: a halter, a lead rope, a couple different types of halters actually, because I want him to get used to both the rope halter and the traditional halter that has clanky metal on it. And you'll see here, he's a very curious horse. He has to go investigate. I love that about him because, from the start, he really wasn't afraid of the halters or the lead rope or me swinging things around because I pretty much just let him explore them on his own terms first. And he discovered in that exploration process that none of these things hurt him. So here I'm just asking him to face up. And I'm going to realize here shortly that this is a bad camera angle. I've been trying different angles to see which one gives me the best angle of the work that I'm doing. And of course, I put it here because he liked to hang out in this little spot here by the barn. But now that it's here, he's hiding off around the other side of the corral. So here I switched the camera angle. Now you can see him a lot better. I'm able to walk up to him pretty quickly now. I can come all the way up, and he's still pulling his head away a little bit, like, I don't know if I want that, and I just wait. I feel like if he's going to be my partner, that I need to show him that I see him when he does that, and that I respect him when he does that. And so I don't just dive in and advance further when he pulls his head away. I wait, and then here I'm trying a new tactic. And I'm asking him, okay, if you don't want me to touch you with my hand right now, can I touch you with the stick instead? And he's fine with that. And so that's where we start with this, where he's comfortable. I'm just rubbing it all over his neck right here, and I'm trying to make it feel good to him so that he understands that when I touch him, it feels good. It's not going to hurt him, and he's not going to get eaten. And here's kind of a cool tip that I picked up from someone else along the way. I'm running my hand up and down the whip here, and he sees it. He's kind of like, uh-oh, her hand's coming towards me, so I'm going to step away. But the reason I'm doing this is because he's perfectly fine with me rubbing him with the lunge whip. But as soon as my hand gets close, he gets a little uneasy. And so I'm using the lunge whip as a sort of bridge between the behavior that he'll accept and the behavior that he's not quite accepting yet. I'm rubbing him with the lunge whip, and I'm bringing my hand up and down the lunge whip so that it's in his vision, and he can kind of see my hand coming closer and further away and closer and further away as he has this sensation on his back of me rubbing him with the whip. And eventually I can move my hand all the way down the whip and then be touching him with my hand. And so here he relaxed, and I just gave him a little break. And I'm switching gears. I like to switch gears a lot. Then I can cover a lot more ground in one session. So instead of just hammering on one subject for an hour, I like to switch back and forth. So here I'm saying touch, I'm using the word touch, and I'm touching it to his nose, and eventually that's going to become a cue that he learns. And it's actually a really handy cue. You'll see in future sessions how that works out. Now his attention is on I think it's a person, a couple people, or a person and a horse walking back there. and he's really interested in what's going on. I think someone's taken their horse for a walk. In this first week, he was really excited about any horse that walked past his pen. The pasture borders are actually right next to him where he's at. And so anytime someone goes to get their horse, they're walking right past his pen. And he would kind of prance around and show off to the horses that are passing him by. And I don't think that he's a vocal horse. I haven't heard him nicker or whinny to anyone. And as I'm doing this voiceover, we're actually on session 24. I'm just a bit behind with getting the videos going. And now we're still dealing with that distraction. And so here I'm just trying to get his attention back on me. He decides to leave, so I just follow him and gently ask him to come back. And if you're trying to ask a horse to do something, or you're approaching a horse while their attention is somewhere other than you, that is a recipe for disaster. That is when they might spook or strike or bolt or some other behavior you don't want. So rather than going in and touching him right away, I focused more on getting his attention back on me, looking at what he's looking at, letting him satisfy that curiosity he has about whatever's going on over there. And then I ask him to come back to me again. And he's still looking over there. And I look over there with him to show him that I see the same thing. And here he's partly looking at me and partly looking past me. So I decide to go ahead and start petting him again. And that's because my movement is in his direct line of vision there. So I feel safe doing that. And now since I've begun touching him and then he loses sight of me and he's looking off in that direction again, I continue to touch him and see if he can handle that while he's looking at something off in the distance. In the first couple of weeks with a wild horse, this is to be expected. Everything that's around him is all completely new to him. He's never seen most of the sights that he is seeing right now. And it takes a week or two for him to really settle into that and get used to all of the commotion that surrounds domesticated life. So I'm just patient with him. Here I'm just standing and looking again at the same things that he's looking at. So here his attention is still not entirely on me. I'm looking over at what he's looking at, and he notices me look over there. And this is something that I think a lot of people underestimate, really, is the horse is always observing you, whether you think they are or not. And if he's noticing things and he's trying to make a decision on whether that's a scary thing, do I need to run around my pen because I'm scared? Do I need to escape? When he's making that sort of a decision, it's important for us to also look at the object that they are looking at and to take a big deep breath after a few seconds of looking at it. Just and relax your body because they notice that. And the more they start to trust you, the more they rely on that and they rely on your guidance. But if you're not even seeing what they're seeing, then they're just going to be like, all right, this creature is blind. So I need to take control and I need to be the one to dictate what happens next. And when you have a horse that stays in that frame of mind, where they believe that they are their only source of survival and they can't trust you to make the good decisions for them, then you end up with a horse that bolts and runs off with its rider, spooks at every little thing because they don't trust you. And just in general, it's a less safe horse to be around. The safest kind of horse to be around is one that fully trusts you and trusts the human to make decisions that, in their mind, could mean life or death. Eventually, I expect this training to result in a horse who, when something scary comes up, he looks to me
for guidance as to what to do next. Should we run or is this safe? Can we stay? And you have two main ways of achieving that. One way, which is more common, is the dominance model, where you push the horse around and demand things from him, basically because you claim the role of leader or alpha. And so they have to do things for you or else. The other option is to base it on an emotional connection, similar to what they may have with other horses in a herd. If you've ever watched horses in a herd, when they see or hear something in the distance that might be a danger to them, they all stop. They stop chewing, they stop moving, so there's silence. They all listen to what it is. They all look in that direction. And if one of the horses takes off running, the rest of them follow. And when they do that, that's not the dominance model at play there. That is an emotional connection between the members of a herd, and one of them saying, "This is dangerous enough that we need to run," and the rest of them respecting that horse's choice and going with them. And it's important to note that when you're basing the training on an emotional connection, this isn't all about snuggles and hugs and treats. There are a lot of little psychological components in here that cause him think of me as a creature who can and does see and hear potential danger and who's able to assess the situation and make a good decision. And that's kind of the methodology that I'm choosing to take here with Silvio. And that doesn't mean that I never use the dominance model or that I never use negative reinforcement. I use those as well. They are all tools in a toolbox. And I have found that there are times when those tools work a little better than emotional training. For example, with a horse that has learned that they can bite and kick, sometimes the best option is to send them away and move their feet and, kind of play that dominance game. It's a bit of a dance. And I used to use negative reinforcement and dominance theory as maybe 90% of my training and 10% positive reinforcement. And I learned that I like the connection and the end result much better when I'm using negative reinforcement and dominance theory as more like 10% of the training and 90% positive reinforcement and emotional training. And when it comes to these topics, it seems like there are just as many opinions and perspectives people in the world. And this is just my opinion and my perspective and how I prefer to work with horses now. And I've come to this after 30 years of playing around with different methods and different tools and different horses. The interesting thing about horses and horse training is that there are always new tools. There are always new ways of thinking about it and of working with horses. And every horse is different. So you just take the culmination of all of the things that you've gained over the years and make the best decision you can for that moment and that horse and the end result that you're looking for. What I'm doing here is I'm introducing him to the sight of me stepping up onto these steps. So now I'm taller than him. A lot of times, the first time you do this, it freaks him out a little bit. And obviously, he's not fazed by it at all. But it's one of those things where eventually I'm going to be using that as a mounting block where once he's saddled and he's ready for his first rides, I'm going to ask him to stand next to that block while I step up there, and it's just easier to get your foot in the stirrup and get over. And a lot of people use mounting blocks, and it's my pet peeve when horses don't stand nicely at the mounting block. And in my opinion, if they aren't going to stand nicely and essentially offer their back to you, then you have no business getting on the horse. It's just one of those things that so many riders and trainers seem to skip. But the way I feel about it is if the horse doesn't want me on his back, I've done something wrong or I've left holes in the training that I need to go back and address before I ever even attempt to climb up on his back. I make a point to start that early. I want him to see it long before I ever put that saddle on his back. I want him to be okay with coming over to me while I'm standing on that step and feeling okay and feeling safe with me standing at a height above him and next to him. And here I'm just introducing him to a saddle pad. And here you can see that he's telling me he's not ready for me to touch him with that by keeping his nose just out of reach when I go to touch him with it. So I set it down to let him investigate it on his own. And he decides to go investigate the saddle too. So sometimes in training, it's important to just kind of stop and rethink things or stop and take a step back if you're not getting the result that you want, and watch the horse and see what they need in order to take that next step. For him, he needed to investigate these things on his own a little bit. And so here I'm just letting him do that. It's important to me for him to know that I'm not going to push him past his comfort zone. And that's because I want to have a partnership with Silvio where everything we do can be a two-sided conversation. And if he's feeling uneasy about something, I want him to know that I see that and that we can take a step back and we can try to approach this from a different angle or go back to working on something a little bit easier. And we can always come back to that thing that was difficult to accept and work on it again at another time. What I'm playing with here is a ribbon wand. This is a sort of sensory tool that has a visual component to it. It flutters in the wind. It's a little bit scary. It also makes a little bit of a sound when the pieces of ribbon touch things or when they rub together. And essentially, I use it to help the horse learn how to manage his actions when he is on sensory overload. Now, the sight of it isn't that surprising to him because the last couple of sessions I've brought it into the pen and just attached it to the side of the panels of his pen. So he has seen it and he has been able to walk up to it and sniff it and kind of check it out. And he's also been able to see what it looks like when the wind picks it up and, it starts fluttering in the wind. So now that I'm holding it and I'm swinging it around a bit, it's really no surprise to him. He's already been prepared for this. And while my goal is to touch him with this today, I'm holding off for right now because his attention is on someone in the parking lot leaving. We have a lot of, boarders and lesson students and whatnot coming and going. And so these are sights and sounds that he's getting used to here in this first week being here. And I don't want to attempt to touch him with something new while his attention is on this car that's leaving. So I just wait until they leave and they're gone, and then his attention can be fully back on me again. And eventually, I want him to be able to handle outside stimuli at the same time that he's handling stimuli from me. But at this stage in the game, it's too early. And if I had done that while those people were in the parking lot and his focus was on something else, then I could cause a problem where I'm kind of compounding things that he might be afraid of. And the more things that you kind of stack up At the same time, that results in a big fat trigger for the horse. And then you end up with a horse that explodes or jumps to the side and spooks and ends up being a danger to the people around him. So I waited until his attention was back on me and I started touching him with the ribbon wand, and he handled it beautifully. So I brought that back and put that back on the panels, and I'm done with that for today. I'll use it more in future sessions where I'm going to expect him to allow me to swing that over his back and around his legs and things like that. But for today, we're going to end that ribbon wand on a good note, and we'll move on to something else. Up until now, when I've used this lunge whip, I've had the lash, I hold it up against the stick so it's not dragging around like it is here. And so now I'm trying something new with it, and I'm letting it drag on the ground. I'm bringing the whip away from him and then back towards him so he can see that motion of the whip and the lash moving in the air and along the ground towards him, because what I'm going to want to do next is swing it right over his back like that and then pull it off. So now he's seeing it on the left side of his body and feeling it on the right side of his body. And I just do this several times because I want him to be able to process that, how it feels. And you can see his ears kind of flicking backwards when it touches him. And he's just trying to get used to that. And now I swung it over and I'm just starting to rub his back with it. And this is the tool that I'm going to use to first teach him leading. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone else use the lunge whip in the same way that I have for teaching a horse leading. But it works so well. It so unbelievably well. It's surprising. And with horses, because their eyes are set more on the sides of their head, they see the left side of their body out of their left eye and the right side of their body out of their right eye. And many times the translation from left to right or from right to left doesn't happen. So you can do something on the left side of their body and they're perfectly fine with it. But then when you switch to the right side, you have to start from scratch and get them used to it on that side as well. So that's what I'm doing here. And I'm also preparing him for the position that I'm going to need to be in order to start teaching him to give to pressure and lead and follow me. So I have the lunge whip over his neck with the lash hanging on the other side, and I'm holding that in my left hand, but with the right hand, I'm petting his nose. And the reason for this is that I want him to start getting used to seeing both of my arms moving at the same time, while also he's feeling that sensory feeling of the string and the stick along his neck. Now, the cowboy way of doing this same sort of exercise is to get the horse running around, and then you essentially rope them, and the rope feels a bit like a punch to the face. And then you pull it tight and you kind of fight them with their opposition reflex. And, it's a lot of work and it's a bit traumatizing for the horse. And I might get some hate for even saying that, but I'm just showing here that there are kinder ways to go about doing it. And so instead of throwing something around his neck that he's terrified of and that he feels the need to fight, instead I'm getting him used to it and I'm getting him so comfortable with it that I can put it all over his head, all over his neck and his back, and he doesn't mind it at all. So then when I put pressure on it eventually to start leading him, not in this session, but I do it in the next session. When I do that, he's not at all afraid of it. And he's able to stay in his left brain thinking mode and think through it and give me the right answer. Where if I had just roped him and fought through his opposition reflex, he stays in his right side of his brain and it's harder to get them back into the left brain to think through it. And what I want with him is I want him to stay in that left side of his brain in that thinking mode as much as possible throughout all of the training. I want him to be able to think through the things that I'm presenting to him logically and come up with solutions instead of reacting to things. And reacting to things is what he's done for 7 years in the wild as a stallion. And you'll notice throughout my training with him, every time he does switch into that right brain kind of panic mode, I need to run away, I just calmly walk after him and ask him to refocus on me. Instead of staying in that panic mode and making him run around some more and making him move his feet, I'm asking him to slow down and switch back into the thinking side of his brain and focus back on me, then make a decision. Now, I haven't done much time lapse in this video so far, but I am going to switch into time lapse here because I'm just spending a lot of time getting him used to the tools. Because I spend the next 10 to 15 minutes really getting him used to having this lunge whip all over his neck and his body, touching him all over the place. I want him to be really calm and really relaxed when I'm using this tool with him. Because in the next few sessions, I'm going to start using that tool to teach him specific cues for leading, and for giving to pressure, for moving certain parts of his body. And he's going to need to be extremely comfortable with this moving all around him. And now that I feel like he's super comfortable with that, I'm moving on to something else. I've just picked up a standard nylon halter. It has metal bits that connect all of the nylon parts. And so when I shake it and move it around, it makes a metallic clinking sound. And I'm just standing here playing around with the buckles and just getting him used to hearing that because eventually I'm going to need to approach him and put that on his head and it's going to make those sounds. And here he's a little nervous about it, but I'm asking him to just sniff it. Now, he has gone up to this on the ground and sniffed it on his own, so he's not too afraid of it. And I'm just asking him to let me pet his nose with it, and he did. That's all. I set it down on the ground, and we'll switch to something else here. We'll switch back to the saddle pad that he didn't want me to touch him with earlier. And we'll try again. I'm just saying, how about now? Can I touch you with it now? And he lets me touch him with it for just a second. And then he says, no, I really don't like that one. And he pulls his head away. And I try to ask again, pulls his head even farther away. So right here, he's telling me, no, I don't want that. And, I'm trying a couple of times, and he's like, no, I said I don't want that. And he takes a step back. And so I set it down on the ground. Okay, no big deal. We'll try something else for now. Now, all of the instructors that I had growing up, they taught me that if you don't push that on the horse and make them accept it right now, that the horse is winning, like it's some sort of game. And if you don't win in this power struggle of what you want to do with the horse, that you're creating a horse that's just going to get away with murder and it's going to be such a horrible horse to be around. And I'm glad that through time and experience, that that's only true if you don't go back to that thing and reapproach it, or you don't take the time to stop and think, what can I do here to help this horse understand this thing that I'm trying to show him, or help him to agree to do what I'm asking him to do? And here I've gone back to using the ribbon wand. And now I'm going to start touching him a little bit further back on his body with it. I'm asking him to turn and face up to me here, and he's deciding to go the other way. And so I'm just following him and asking him again. And then there he goes. He does. He turns and he faces me. He's a little distracted because his dinner is about to come. And so he's looking off in the direction of the lady who's bringing his dinner. And now I'm going back to touching him on the nose with this, and he was letting me touch him on the nose with it earlier. And so now I'm going to start bringing it back a little bit further on his cheek and then on his neck. And my goal here is for him to let me just kind of hold it there along his neck and along his shoulder while it's fluttering around him. And now we're going to start to lose quality in the picture here because the GoPro doesn't pick up nighttime vision very well, and we're losing daylight. So I've kind of artificially adjusted the brightness here just so that you can still see what I'm doing, and that makes the picture a bit grainy. And here he's allowing me to rub his neck, and now it's blowing all around his shoulder and his leg. And that was the goal that I had for it. So I left it at that. He did a great job, so I just walked away. I don't want to beat a dead horse when he's down. So if I'm working on something and the horse gets it, then I stop and I move on to something else and we can return to it again later. I don't want to do 100 repetitions of something and just annoy the crap out of him with it. I like to switch things up a lot. And now I'm bringing out the scary, traumatizing flag. For anyone who saw Silvio's auction video at the Bureau of Land Management, there were a couple of people who were very harshly swinging these flags underneath the panels and scaring the crap out of him. So he was just jumping around like a crazy horse. And so I'm just standing here. Now, he's already had the chance a couple of times to walk up to this flag on his own and stick his nose into it and investigate it. So he's not too afraid of it anymore. But I'm just kind of swinging it around and letting him see it. I'm trying to see if he will come forward to investigate it. And he does. He sticks his nose right in it. And so all of that stuff that scared him in his auction video, we are really working through that. And he's really accepting this now as something that's not going to kill him or eat him. And now that he's okay with touching it, I bring it away and then bring it back towards him. I swing it around a little bit, make some noise with it, and then bring it back and see if, he's okay with it. Here I'm dragging it along the ground because some horses have a big fear of things dragging along the ground. Some horses have a big fear of things fluttering up in the air. Some horses are scared of both of those things. And so with him, I'm just covering all bases. So when I pick things up and approach him with things, I want him to see them in the air, on the ground. I want him to feel them touching him and kind of encase that whole sensory experience with them. Now, he did great with that flag. So I, again, just put it away. We'll come back to it again another time. And I picked up the rope halter. And this is something that I'm going to ask him to put his nose into so that I can halter him in future sessions. So in this session, I'm just kind of opening up the nose part of it here. And this is a stiff rope halter. They make a lot of rope halters that are soft and flimsy. And while that works well for a horse that already knows how to halter, this one that's stiff works a lot better for horses that don't know how to put a halter on yet because I can hold the end of it and it's stiff enough to kind of hold its shape. Now this piece is going to have to go over his ears eventually. So I'm just holding it with two hands and petting him on the nose with it. And he said right there, I don't know, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that. He took a step away, thought about it, licked and chewed, released some stress, and then he came back and allowed me to pet him with it again. So I set it down to reward him for that, and I'm going to switch into something else now. And he's so curious. I love that when I put something down, if he's sort of unsure about it, I just set it down and walk away. And he goes and he checks it out. Not all horses are that curious, but because he is that curious, I want to use that to my advantage. Now I'm just getting him used to the rope. I want him to see it out of his, the side of his vision, coming in and out of his blind spot, because underneath his chin there, that's a bit of a blind spot. And so I'm kind of swinging it underneath there, back and forth, left and right. And I want him to be able to see it in one eye, then the other as it's swinging back and forth. And then I swing it up over him, and that surprises him. It's a little bit heavier than the lunge whip that I was using. The lunge whip that I was swinging over him is a very thin, it's like a very thin lash on it. And so when it touches him, it's very delicate. You can barely feel it. Now, this lead rope has some weight to it. So when I swung that over him, it kind of surprised him because there was a bit more of a sensation there with it. And after I swung it over him, I was just kind of swinging the rope back and forth so he could feel that. And now that I took it off of him, I'm asking him if he'll come up and sniff it, just because that surprised him a little bit. So I'm saying, hey, do you want to investigate it now? And he let me rub his face with it, so that's great. I apologize for the darkness here because, like I said, the GoPro doesn't record darkness very well. And, there are some important things that were in the end of this session, kind of in the dark, that I didn't want to leave out because I want you guys to be able to see the full training sessions without anything really cut out. But unfortunately, we're just going to lose too much light here, and I'm going to need to end this session. So if you have any comments or questions for me, feel free to leave them in the comment section. I'll try to answer everything that I can, or if there are things that you'd like to see me talk about in upcoming training sessions, let me know and I'll see if I can squeeze that in somewhere. And obviously, if you found any value in this video, please like and share. And I hope you enjoyed session 6 with Silvio. I'll see you in the next session. Bye, horse friends.